The insult came first, sharp and cutting, hurled across the dusty training field like a stone. "Get that thing out of her hands before she hurts herself." Laughter followed, cruel and echoing, bouncing off the walls of the range where Navy SEAL candidates trained under the unrelenting sun. Every eye turned toward the figure they mocked. A woman kneeling behind a Barrett, Volba sniper rifle. The weapon dwarfed her frame, its weight enough to humble even the strongest of men. Her silence only deepened their ridicule. The chief, a broad-shouldered veteran with scars of his own, narrowed his eyes. He had seen hundreds of men crack under the pressure of buds, but never had he witnessed a candidate step into the pit of hostility and bear it without a word. She didn't flinch, she didn't argue. She simply adjusted the stock against her shoulder, checked the wind with a glance, and stared downrange. The Barrett's steel pressed cold into her skin, but the fire in her chest burned hotter. Dust carried the faint scent of oil and gunpowder, a scent that reminded her of nights long past, when her only companions were the weight of a rifle and the ghosts of those she couldn't save. Her name was Maya Rourke. Few here knew it, fewer cared. To them, she was an outlier, an intrusion in a brotherhood that had spent generations convincing itself that women could not stand among them. To them, she was a curiosity at best, a liability at worst. But to herself, she was simply a soldier who had carried more than her share of burdens. Her backstory was not whispered around the barracks because no one bothered to ask. She had served years as a combat sniper, moving through battlefields where silence was survival and precision meant life or death. She had counted the seconds between heartbeats before pulling a trigger that would alter the balance of war. She had memorized the sound of breath, leaving her body as she lay for hours unmoving, waiting, always waiting. And she had lived with the weight of names, friends, brothers, comrades who never came home. One night in the Hindu Kush, she lay prone on a ridge above a valley where enemy fighters prepared an ambush against her unit. Wind howled against her cheek, freezing her skin, but her hands were steady. The shot was impossible by ordinary measure, 3,247 meters, the earth curving beneath the bullet's arc, the air itself a wall against her. But when the trigger broke, she felt time shatter. The round carried death, and with it, the salvation of her team. That kill was recorded quietly, buried in files no one read, because recognition wasn't given to ghosts. She became a myth whispered only in certain rooms, a record breaker whose face was forgotten even as her bullet made history. Now here she was, surrounded by doubters who saw only fragility in her slight frame, not knowing they stood in the shadow of a legend. The chief felt it before he knew it. There was something unsettling in her calm, something that made mockery sound hollow and small. He moved closer, arms crossed, eyes locked not on her, but on the Barrett she cradled as if it were an extension of her body. The taunts escalated. "What's she gonna do, pose with it for Instagram?" one barked. "That thing's heavier than she is," another added, drawing chuckles. Their laughter became the chorus of cowardice, loud, safe, and ignorant. No one stepped in, no one silenced them. Silence, after all, was complicity. And yet, she remained untouched by their words, like a stone in the river that refused to move, though currents raged around it. The chief's patience thinned. He knew this environment. Cruelty was a test, a tool to strip candidates bare. But what he witnessed wasn't training. It was dismissal, prejudice sharpened into humiliation. Still, he said nothing. Not yet. Something told him her silence would answer louder than he ever could. Maya leaned into the Barrett, the desert air drying her lips. She adjusted her cheek weld, exhaled once, and let the world fall away. For her, there was no audience. There were no jeers. There was only the faint shimmer of heat downrange, the blur of a distant target dancing in the mirage. She pressed finger to trigger, felt its familiar resistance, and broke it like glass. The recoil thundered through her bones, but her body absorbed it like it always had. A heartbeat later, the target nearly a mile away quivered, then collapsed. Not the edge, not near the mark, dead center. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply reset, chambered another round, and fired again. Then again, every shot whispered the same truth, precision beyond doubt, mastery beyond insult. The laughter died slowly, choked off by the impossibility of what they were seeing. Eyes widened, jaws slackened. The silence that followed was heavier than any insult hurled before. The chief knew then, this wasn't luck. This wasn't bravado. This was a predator of distances, a ghost of the long war, a woman who had walked with death and returned bearing no need for applause. He stepped forward at last, his boots grinding against the gravel. His voice was low but carried with it the authority of years. "Do you know what record she holds?" The men glanced at one another, uncertain, suddenly uneasy. The chief's gaze never wavered. 3,247 meters, he said slowly, each syllable like a hammer striking an anvil. "The longest confirmed sniper kill on record. While you were playing heroes in safe barracks, she was making history you'll never touch." Silence deepened. Some shifted uncomfortably, others dropped their eyes. The weight of their earlier mockery hung in the air like smoke. Maya did not speak. She didn't need to. Her silence was her armor, her proof, her unshakable dignity. She had long ago learned that respect demanded was worthless. Respect earned in silence was eternal. The chief looked at her then, and for the first time in years, his hardened face softened with something close to reverence. "Some warriors don't need to shout," he said, almost to himself, though the words carried to every ear. "Their silence speaks louder than a battlefield." It was a line that would echo long after the dust settled, a truth too sharp to forget. The payoff came not in applause, but in the shift of posture, the straightening of backs, the silent acknowledgement that swept across the field. A brotherhood that had denied her began to see her, truly see her, not as an outsider but as a warrior whose shadow stretched farther than theirs ever could. Later, when the sun sank and the field emptied, Maya remained alone with her rifle. She touched the cool steel with the gentleness of someone laying flowers at a grave. For every shot she took, there were faces she remembered, voices she carried, ghosts who would never fade. She did not fight for recognition, she fought for them. And that was enough. Her silence became legend that day, carried in whispers across training fields, spoken in mess halls with reluctant awe. Men who once mocked now repeated her name with respect, as though speaking it too loudly might break the fragile truth they had witnessed. Some stories are shouted. Others are written in silence, in the steady breath before a trigger breaks, in the unshakable stillness of a warrior who refuses to bow. Hers was the latter, and in the end, the chief knew legends like hers would never need defending. They would simply stand, like mountains against the wind, silent, immovable, eternal. This is not only her story, but a reminder of every silent hero whose victories remain unseen, whose sacrifices are buried in shadows, whose strength is not measured in applause, but in the quiet weight of honor. Wherever you're watching from, pause for a moment and ask yourself, how many battles have been fought in silence? How many heroes walk among us unnoticed, carrying scars the world never sees? Share your thoughts, share your respect. And if stories like Maya's move you, stay with us, because more voices of the silent deserve to be heard.